If you are going to be bad, you better be the best at it. Manipulation, cunningness, power hungry. Machiavellianism is one of the traits that forms the dark triad along with narcissism and psychopathy. To understand Machiavellianism, we need to understand the life of Niccolo Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli was born in Florence, Italy in 1469. His father, Bernardo, who was a doctor of law, was the poorest among the wealthy family members. The family was holding Florence's most important offices. His family lived frugally and in a small property near the city. Niccolo Machiavelli was born in a chaotic era. The individuals running the city-states would rise and fall suddenly. So the system was a complete chaos. At that time, Florence was a thriving center of philosophy and a brilliant showcase of arts. Machiavelli was taught grammar, rhetoric, and Latin by his teacher, Paolo da Roncillion. Florence was at the time one of the centers of Greek scholarship in Europe. He certainly read Greek authors in translation, such as Thucydides, Plato, Xenophon, Aristotle, Polybius, Plutarch, and Ptolemy. Not long after, Savonarola was put to death after him describing the church as a whore. Machiavelli was appointed to serve under Adriani as head of the second chancery. He was only 29 and had no prior political experience. A month after he was appointed to the chancery, he was also appointed to serve as a secretary to the 10th, the Committee on War, which was a very important designation at the time. For decades to come, he was considered one of the top diplomats in Florence. He carried out several diplomatic missions, most notably to the papacy in Rome. Machiavelli's success was short-lived, as in August 1512, the Florentine Republic was overthrown, and the Medici family gained back the power, backed by the head of the Catholic Church. The Medici accused him of conspiracy against them. They had him imprisoned, where he was tortured for 3 weeks and then exiled from the city. When he was in exile and living on his farm estate, he produced his most famous and best work. He wrote many other books, but The Prince was his most influential work. So for the sake of this video's length, we will be looking at Machiavelli's philosophy and personality with the perspective of this book. His work concentrated on the possibility of a new prince, and to get rid of traditional hereditary prince. The target of the work was to gain attention of a ruler, hence at that time Lorenzo Medici, who was the head of the family and a banker. The book Prince appears to showcase the immoral acts are justified if they can help achieve political glory. In simpler words, a leader should only focus on power rather than being good. A leader should only think of the good of a nation rather than being himself an example of kindness and goodness, which was more traditional way. By contrast, a new prince has the more difficult task in ruling. He must first stabilize his newfound power in order to build an enduring political structure. The book was generally agreed as being innovative because it was written in a vernacular Italian rather than Latin, a practice that had become increasingly popular at that time. The book Prince served as a manual for keeping an individual in power by any means necessary. Machiavelli generalizes that there were several virtuous Roman ways to hold a newly acquired province. Using a republic as an example of how new prince can act are as follows: to install one's princedom in the new acquisition, or to install colonies of one's people there, which is better. To indulge the lesser powers of the area without increasing their power. To put down the powerful people. Not to allow a foreign power to gain reputation. Machiavelli emphasizes that an individual should not only focus on present problems, but also on the future ones. An individual should not enjoy the benefit of time, but rather the benefit of one's integrity and discipline, because time can bring evil as well as good. The book Prince reminded people that power is always up for grabs. It's always a question of what can be taken by force or treachery, and always, despite all protests to the contrary, the prime concern of any ruler. This written work on ruthlessness by Niccolo Machiavelli was inspired by Cesare Borgia. After initially entering the church and becoming a cardinal on his father's election to the papacy, Borgia resigned after the death of his brother in 1498. He acted as leader of mercenaries for King Louis XII. He occupied Milan and Naples during the Italian Wars. At the same time, he carved out a state for himself in central Italy. Most of the work to occupy these states were done by his mercenary Ramiro de Lorca. His ruthlessness including torturing people and do whatever he wanted to take over by any means. When Borgia visited the state of Cesena, he clearly noticed that people there hated him due to de Lorca, which should not be a surprise to any sane man as he clearly given him freedom to be ruthless as he can to occupy those states. But Borgia wanted to change his image to the people, so he ordered his men to capture de Lorca and execute him by chopping his body in 2 pieces and put it on a stick along with his severed head in the center of the town square. After that, as any political individual today, Borgia told people that de Lorca has acted on his own, and he would never ask for his soldiers to do such things on his people. Machiavelli mentioned Borgia in his work as the ideal leader, as he took power in his hands by any necessary means. Machiavelli believed that for a ruler, it was better to be widely feared than to be greatly loved. A loved ruler retains authority by obligation, while a feared leader rules by fear of punishment. Machiavelli emphasized the necessity for the brute force or trickery, including the extermination of entire noble families. According to him, a leader cannot always be good, kind, and humane. The role requires to be inhumane, cruel, biased, and cunning at times, again to make sure both positive and negative sides are used in a fair way and with balance, according to Machiavelli. Is it better to be feared or loved? This was Machiavelli's question that he answered that, I'm sure every leader would wish to be seen as compassionate rather than cruel. All the same, he must be careful not to use his compassion unwisely. For example, he wrote in Borgia's case that he was thought to be cruel, yet his cruelty and trickery restored order to Romania and united it, making the state more peaceful and people more loyal. He also wrote that a leader should rule with a cool mind, by not being too humane, because he can become careless by trusting people all the way. And on the other hand, if he does not trust anybody at all, he will become cruel and unbearable. Whether it is better to be feared or loved. So to his answer in simple words to the question, that one would prefer to be both, but since they do not go together easily, if you have to choose, it's much safer to be feared than loved. He said that most people can be ungrateful and full of lies if they are loved too much or shown too much kindness, that they become fake, melt away in the face of fear, or can stab you in the back anytime. But on the other hand, fear means fear of punishment, and that's something people never forget. Fear is permanent, whereas loving is temporary, as Machiavelli wrote. Being feared is compatible with not being hated. There are limitations to everything. A leader won't be hated if he keeps his hands off people's properties and their women or children. If he has to execute someone, he only does so when he has proper justification and evidence. Above all else, he must not inherit other man's property, because a man can forget his father's death sooner or later, but he won't forget the loss of his inheritance and livelihood. Be loved when possible, be feared when not, but never be hated, as it can lead to a permanent path of destruction. And this was the perfect politician for Machiavelli. Machiavelli said that it takes only 2 things to win people: appearance, results. This applies to today's politicians as well. We only see their speeches and interviews, which is basically an appearance, and we never see what goes on behind the scenes. And on top of that, results are the key factor to drive people's admiration and trust towards you. The results does not always have to come with honesty, doing good, and kindness. The results should come with any means necessary. Machiavelli wanted an ideal leader to have the virtue. Mind you, this is not virtue but virtue. For example, the guiltless killing of a hyena by the lion. Hyena does not feel bad killing other small animals under the food chain. So why should lion feel guilty killing a hyena? The desire of power should be number one concern for an ideal leader, and then other activities or priorities fall under that. He wanted a new leader who leave all the traditional ways of politics and makes his way up to the top by trickery, lying, scheming, again, by any means necessary. And once he gets to the top, then he can take all the other states of the country and then unite the country to make it more peaceful, prosperous, and lively, which will have strong roots as an empire, and other empires should think hard before invading them. This basically goes against fortuna, which means fortune, where we do our work and then leave everything else in the hands of the luck. Machiavelli never had any significant power in his hands, nor did he rule even a city or state. Why and who would want to be inspired by Niccolo Machiavelli's work? Well, the broad answer in a sane word is no one. When other leaders in the world who did not follow Machiavellianism still rose to power and brought change, revolution, peace, and growth to their nations, Niccolo Machiavelli just wrote his ideas, that's all. And even one of his letters was sent to Lorenzo Medici, and it was not even read by him and probably was discarded in the waste. We do not have any evidence so far that Machiavelli himself put any of his own ideas into practice in a real world. After the failure of his work, The Prince, Machiavelli lost all hope, and then he wrote several plays after participating in intellectual groups in Florence, one of them being The Mandrake or La Mandragola, which was a sexual comedy. To go back to the beginning of this video, in 1512, Medici family asked Machiavelli to be their advisor on the French and Spanish conflict, and he did advise them with his political beliefs. But Spanish troops defeated the Florentines. With the fall of Medici family, Machiavelli was accused of conspiracy and tortured for 3 weeks, and then again went into exile where he wrote The Prince. Machiavelli died on 21st of June 1527 from a stomach ailment. The Prince was not published during Machiavelli's lifetime, but later 15 editions of The Prince were placed on the index of Paul IV in 1559, a measure which nearly banned publication of the book in Catholic areas except in France. 3 principal writers took the field against Machiavelli between the publication of his works and their condemnation in 1559. These were the English Cardinal Reginald Pole and the Portuguese Bishop Geronimo Osorio, and the Italian humanist and later Bishop Ambrogio Caterino Politi. The people who were opposed to the Machiavellian ideology only read the overview of the book and did not understand the philosophy, as they only brought out the ideas of brutality, being inhumane, and advocating for the rejection of virtue completely. Modern materialist philosophy developed in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, starting in the generations after Machiavelli. At the end of the day, Machiavelli pointed fingers on the Christian morals and how they affect the leadership in a negative way, which is much relevant today, and most people, I think, would agree with this. Thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, please click the like button and help this small YouTuber out by subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.